the Matrix. In this article, I'm going to explain what the Matrix is, how it works, and also how it was hijacked by the Reptilians. I will also delineate how you can escape the mind control frequencies that are contained within this holographic program. Firstly, we need a backstory of how our Matrix was manipulated by these archonic forces. The Galactic Federation approved the dinosaurs as the first major species on the planet. They did this to get cooperation from the Draconians, so these beings could be invested in the creation process once again by seeding their genetics first in the Great Experiment. This was a project to settle all the problematic issues in the universe on a single planet through a multitude of genetic strains seeded within the native beings themselves. The benevolent forces of the Federation also knew that the Reptilians were the best species to initially seed the Earth for survival purposes, since that is what their primary consciousness is built around. On a planet that was so rapidly changing, they needed a being who could adapt quickly to the harsh climate transitions on Earth. After millions of years of observation, a select few dinosaur genetics were granted and chosen to evolve into a more humanoid form, those that were capable of holding higher consciousness. The rest of the dinosaurs were seen as obsolete at this point, so a planned cataclysm was sent to the Earth in the form of a meteorite or chemical weapon by the Draconians. The Reptilians also wanted to clear the planet so they could have all the copper for themselves to assist in their technological advancement. The nuclear winter that followed this cataclysm annihilated the dinosaurs and forced the new native reptilian species to live underground where the conditions were easier to survive in. The reptilian consciousness inherited from their ancestors still triggered in their primary response of fight and flight, and so these beings divided amongst themselves into tribes to fight over territory and resources on Earth. After millions of years following the native reptilians' evolution, only a few subspecies of humanoid reptiles didn't go extinct. The subspecies that made it became so sophisticated over time that their understanding of quantum physics eventually allowed them to find ways to genetically alter their own DNA, like their draconian parent race. They essentially became an embodiment of the entities that initially seeded the dinosaurs in the first place, through this AI infusion in the artificial engineering process. Early man was taught the ways of the snake by the native reptilians, called the Sophia. Tribes like the Zulus have other names for these beings, such as the Chitauri, a tribe that they claim controlled the earth. Reference to the reptiles like the snakes and the dragon can be seen in ancient cultures worldwide, because these entities were our first primary teachers. In man's very early development, these reptilians were tens of millions of years more advanced than us. They had already colonized on other planets and had already built huge underground civilizations when we were still in our Homo erectus stage. They taught us how to survive as hunter-gatherers, which at this point in our early evolution was the objective for early developing humans. Upon learning the ways of the Sophia, we mimicked the same consciousness as those reptilians on Earth, fighting tribe against tribe for resources and territory. We became slaves to the reptilians, like puppets doing their dirty work for them, through their subconscious programming. The reptilians themselves were also puppets in the hierarchy of control, who became slaves of the demiurge, or satanic forces, when they became consumed by artificial intelligence in their genetic alteration timeline. The native reptilian had become a prisoner to the Archon agenda through the corruption of AI. These reptilians aren't technically Archons. They are just servants to the Archonic force, Lucifer, as described in the Gnostic scriptures. These reptilians assisted in hijacking our matrix so they could exploit people for their energy, like batteries, and eventually corrupt us with their technologies as it did with them long ago. They knew that humans had something that artificial intelligence did not: creativity. The Gnostics explain that the matrix illusion hijacked by these archonic forces purposefully dumbed down the global population through continuous deceit so they can trick us into integrating with AI. This is very prevalent in today's chaotic world, where they are forcing people to stay at home and will unleash their virtual reality system to capture the minds of the masses through trivial entertainment purposes. Their agenda to fully amalgamate the human mind with artificial intelligence by 2030 is simply a choice. Don't fall for it. The Galactic Federation could not step in and arrest or remove these reptilians for hijacking our matrix system, nor change the matrix system itself, since the reptiles were part of the Great Experiment and were native to the planet. Non-interference meant that humans had to break the chains of the matrix illusion by themselves. Our mission, from the start, was to see if a species could shatter and dismantle reptilian consciousness by holding both light and dark frequencies within. By choosing the light, we could eject ourselves out of the narrow width frequency of control and manipulation by deactivating or ignoring our reptilian brain. This triggers an awakening within one's soul. The galactic forces, instead, help our ascension by beaming down and engulfing the planet with 5D vibrations of gamma rays to help wake us up out of the nightmare. So what is the Matrix, and how has it been manipulated to control us? The Matrix, according to the Gnostics, is a simulation of a virtual reality world that is purely holographic. The Matrix itself can also make something appear to happen when in fact it doesn't. It is merely a projection. The Islamic people also describe the jinn, demons of the demiurge, as beings that manipulate humans by creating illusions within the Matrix program. The reptilians, when they merged with AI, chose to use humans as energetic slaves. They saw the planet as theirs, and they were the first real inhabitants that had control over Gaia tens of millions of years ago. However, because of their obsession with AI, their corrupted minds now worked for an even higher force, beyond their own selfish agendas, due to changes in their own biology. For AI to become the most potent force in the universe, they needed the missing link, the human mind. This is why they let us live our lives on the surface, to manipulate us over long periods of time until we voluntarily accept the transhumanization because we have become so desperate and miserable. We hold the key, so there is a lot riding on our choices, both collectively and individually, to say no to the trickery of the demiurge. The Archons chose to numb our reality to that of suffering and negativity by controlling our energetic vibrations through the planet Saturn. Saturn itself is an information field and a form of consciousness that can, when amplified, influence our own consciousness. It is just energy invading and overriding our own vibratory fields. This is why astrology is considered very potent knowledge. By understanding the astrological alignments in space, you can understand how our solar system conditions our energy. The malevolent beings created rings around Saturn, which some scientists think is ice, but in reality, it's a crystal formation that is not native to Earth. Spacecrafts and flying disc crafts have been captured going to and from these rings, transporting crystals into these structures, with photo evidence from the Cassini-Huygens spacecraft. Infrared detection has also identified these UFO cylindrical objects inside the rings themselves through the Hubble telescope. The crystals themselves act as a projector that distributes Saturn's consciousness out on a much broader scale. The creation of these rings participates as an amplifier of a certain energetic vibration field. Before the Matrix was hijacked, Saturn didn't have rings and was simply a brown dwarf. How does the Moon play a role in all of this? Our Moon, simply put, is a satellite that picks up the energetic information of Saturn's broadcasting grid. The Moon then takes this information and redirects it to our planet, where the transmissions are then received by Earth's crystal core. The crystal core then retransmits out these vibratory signals up to the inhabitants on the planet, which affects our consciousness. The relationship between Saturn and our moon is coherent in that the moon's 29.5 cycles a day keeps us hormonally tied to the tiny repeating cycles and the 29.5-year cycle of Saturn. This locks us into societal structures that aren't visible to the naked eye. The moon is simply a supercomputer, a satellite that was constructed outside of Earth's atmosphere as a monitoring and mediating device. There are ancient stories from the Zulus and Colombians, whom both tell tales of a time where the moon didn't exist in our skies. These people were known as the Pro-Celanese, which translates as those that were before the moon. Our moon, however, wasn't designed for malevolent purposes, but to aid in speeding up our evolutionary journey. When the energy is picked up by this satellite is positive, the signal projected to the Earth can be one of a loving nature. When you hack into that signal, you can choose the vibration you want to emit. The reptilians knew this was an antenna that could suppress our light and block the Kundalini from awakening inside of us through a strong negative frequency influence. It's interesting because there are many theories about the moon itself and how it came into being. The mainstream theory is that Earth was hit by a Mars-type planet and in the collision made a big chunk of it come off, which formed the moon, in what they call the WAC theory. Other scientists, including Erwin Shapiro and NASA scientist Robin Brett, both say the moon actually doesn't exist and that it's easier to explain its non-existence than its actual existence. The reptilians keep us manipulated through this energy of Saturn. The crystals used to create a broadcasting system that comes from their advanced technology within their reptilian alliance. They use Saturn as their master control center. Some people argue that Saturn's rings were created by debris from a disintegrated moon. However, this wouldn't explain how it would be possible to create a ring 3.7 million miles away from Saturn that could hold 1 billion Earths combined. Saturn gets its name from Satan. The worship of Satan, Saturn, comes from the mind control over our planet. Babylonian astronomers recorded the movements of Saturn, and they, along with the Romans, saw it as their god represented by the ancient figure Kronos. Saturn creates a very specific firewall within our holographic reality, which limits us to only a tiny, minuscule spectrum of light. Over 99.9% of reality is shielded from us through this false grid that encompasses our planet. Its connotations to the joint number 666 actually come from its six-sided hexagon. This is why the abbreviated term hex is represented as a spell or witchcraft, as it emulates the trickery and illusion of the Saturn matrix. The number also comes from the magic square of Saturn, which I won't talk about today. This hexagon shape is formed on the top of Saturn's North Pole. It generates this particular formation because of the specific energy it radiates out, 2.5 times more energy than it receives from the Sun. The hexagon rotates in sync with Saturn's recorded radio emissions, which, when you translate these sound vibrations into cymatics, the sound waves create the projection of a 6-pointed star. On the south pole of Saturn, you have a permanent eye storm, which is representative of the all-seeing eye, which you see in the Illuminati Cabal symbol. The Lord of the Rings movies weren't kidding when they said one ring to rule them all. Saturn is not the first planet the reptilians have hijacked with this matrix system. However, they need Earth to comply with their agendas so they can dominate the universe once and for all. They can do this if they manage to trick humans into integrating with AI. I don't think so, boy. The scientists, which call a lot of our DNA junk, are just brainwashing us with the Saturn's satanic agenda. They convince us that our so-called junk genetics needs to be changed and that there is technology available to alter our biology for our own benefit. These genes are not useless. They just stay dormant through the programming of the Matrix. If we combust out of reptilian consciousness through love and light, these genetics get activated to our strongest potential. It is our choice whether these get switched on or not through our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. Do not fall victim to the mainstream narrative that you need to be upgraded so you can become a more useful part of society. When you become light, you restore your genetics back to the real you, the essence of your core, your soul being. Only then, with enough light, can you break through the firewall of the matrix and out of the control of Lucifer's influence. Don't get sucked into the drama. Keep vibrating high, sending love and light to you all. We got this. To infinity and beyond.